And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God.
You guys, I have some sad news today. Republican devil Donald Trump has been detaining children in concentration camps, similar, like the Hitler movement, where he killed a bunch of Jewish people and children in gas chambers. These people. Donald Trump is now detaining Mexican immigrants at the border and separating people from their families. Children have been crying. There has been news reports that their children, the older children, are changing the diapers of the other children, and they're literally behind cages. You guys, these children are crying out for their families. This is a sin against God, okay, that these children have to be in these camps and suffering, while people in Donald Trump's administration sits behind him like he's an evil dictator, like he's their God. They're worshiping this man. This has gone on long enough, and people need to stand up. They need to get this man out of office, because every turn he makes, every direction he goes in, is to spread hate. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the disgusting people and Trump supporters that support him. If there's any Christian out there that supported Donald Trump before, I don't know how you can see these images and see these things that he's doing and still support him. This man is not of God. God is not behind Donald Trump, and stop lying on God. God would never support someone or put someone in place like Donald Trump, who's just full of hate, who is basically like a 2.0 of a Hitler, okay? God was disgusted by the things that happened with the Jewish people and hated the things that Hitler did and hated him. So he hates wickedness, he hates evilness and unrighteousness and darkness abides in Donald Trump. You have these children crying out in horrible conditions behind cages. They're not even in a humane, set these children in a humane way where they can even rest. These children are sitting on disgusting, dirty pavement floors with things laying on cots, not even something like a mattress. These kids didn't even get the luxury to have a bed, a decent human right to have a decent bed. They're sitting on concrete floors, and they don't even have. Why are the older children have to change the younger children's diapers? What is going on back there? Why aren't there proper things put in place for these people? Donald Trump is a devil and a disgusting human being, a deplorable human being. How can any Christian person say that they follow God and see these conditions? And not just this story. Many things have been around Donald Trump, many disgusting things he's been doing. There is no way that any person, if there's any black person, any Spanish person supporting this Donald Trump, you must be a very sick individual. And yes, I've seen that happen where there's people of color supporting him. You must be a really self-hating person to even support this kind of wickedness, and a dark-hearted person. He is another Hitler. Okay, these children, there have been news reports that the children are given numbers. They're given numbers just like concentration camps, where they tattooed numbers into the Jewish people's bodies to count them like cattle. They're treating these people like cattle. This is disgusting and inhumane, and I'm going to show you guys some videos, and I want y'all to watch this. Pay attention here, and just take a look at what's going on right now, you guys.
Still being taken from their parents on the border tonight, as President Trump met with House Republicans behind closed doors, calling on them to pass legislation to fix the mess he made.
These are laws that have been broken for many years, decades, but we had a great meeting.
So sources telling CNN the president didn't take questions from members of his own party, went on and on about his promised border wall and called for $25 billion to build it. Sounds like hostage taking, doesn't it? We'll talk about that. And he said his daughter Ivanka talked to him about images of children, well over 2,000 of them so far, being separated from their parents. Some of those children held in cages, some housed in this tent city along the southern border. Even though the president's daughter has so far remained silent publicly when so many others, including the president's supporters, have been speaking out. And if you're tempted, amid the onslaught of misinformation coming your way, to think this can't be as heartless as it seems, well, I want you to just listen to Trump loyalist Corey Lewandowski.
I read today about a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who was taken from her mother and put in a cage. I read about did you say want to a 10-year-old with Down syndrome
what
being
I
taken
said
from
is
her
you can
mother?
pick anything you want out, but the bottom line is very clear.
How dare you?
When you
How
cross
absolutely
the border
dare you,
illegally,
sir?
There is a word for that. And that word is disgraceful. But make no mistake, this is happening because it's what President Trump wants. This is what Donald Trump wants. He could put a stop to all of this at any time, right away. No other administration has done this. But not only is the president ignoring growing anger over his policy, he is continuing to blame, guess what? Democrats.
As a result of Democrat-supported loopholes in our federal laws, most illegal immigrant families and minors from Central America who arrive unlawfully at the border cannot be detained together or removed together, only released.
So without outrage, without hyperbole, that is simply not true. And what do you call something that's not true? It's a lie. The fact is, this administration, this White House, decided to prosecute every single adult caught crossing the border illegally, even if they came with children, separating parents from their kids with no clear plan to reunite them. That's the fact. The president himself chose this fight. Immigration gets him like nothing, gets him going like nothing else. And he proved it today again, doubling down on his rhetoric, claiming undocumented immigrants will, his word, infest our country. This is a president who is still determined to build his wall, and he appears to be willing to hold thousands of children hostage to get it. That's right, I said hostage. Many of those children too young to understand what's happening to them, but Americans understand exactly what is happening here. We see it with our own eyes. We're not stupid. We know what's going on. So let's bring in now CNN's White House correspondent Caitlin Collins and CNN political analysts April Ryan and Jonathan Martin. Good to have all of you on this evening. Caitlin, standing there in front of the White House where all of this was conjured up. Are we any closer tonight to a change to this policy as a result of the president's meeting with Republicans on Capitol Hill?
We sure don't seem to be, Don. That meeting on Capitol Hill was initially supposed to be like a pep rally, essentially, for the president to garner some support for these immigration bills that these House Republicans are hoping can get passed. That doesn't seem to be the discussion. Of course, the focus of that meeting seemed like it was going to be the outrage over this policy of separating families at the border, something that has dominated news coverage in recent days, and even clearly the president's mind, if you look at his Twitter feed or comments he's made at other times. But we're told by sources who were in that meeting tonight that the president only touched on it briefly, and saying that he did speak with his daughter Ivanka about it, that she touched on it, that she showed him images of it. And of course, we've seen in the past those images have garnered the president to do something in a situation like that. But the president repeated today in that meeting with House Republicans that he believed this is a legislative solution. So it doesn't seem that any of these members confronted the president over this, even though they have worded or issued issued these strongly worded statements. It doesn't seem that when they were actually in a room with the president that they said anything, because, Don, our sources tell us the president didn't take any questions. So it didn't come down to that debate that a lot of Washington thought they were going to see tonight between the president and these members who were outraged over this. It was just the president essentially going over his greatest hits.
Yeah, it's always someone releasing a strongly worded statement. What does that mean these days? So, Jonathan, a Freedom Caucus source told CNN that both of these immigration bills are designed to fail, and that the president is he's the only one who doesn't get the joke on this. Yeah. So what happens when these bills fail? What does the president do about these kids and families then?
I was in the Capitol this afternoon, Don, talking to some folks who work in the leadership on the House side, and my understanding is that there's no hope that the conservative bill gets anywhere near the votes needed to pass. But there is some hope that the broader and more mainstream bill that would offer some accommodation for the Dreamers and now has language to address the kids at the border, that there is some hope that that could pass. Now, the challenge there, Don, is that even if you pass that bill, the Senate is unlikely to move on a broader bill that addresses the Dreamers as well as these kids stuck at the border without their parents. So what I'm told is that what's likely to happen is that the House does not move some kind of a more narrow bill about the kids at the border. The Senate goes first, passes it overwhelmingly, and that puts enough pressure on the House that they then pass their own straightforward, clean, narrowly targeted version of a bill to get those kids back with their parents.
Quick answer for me.
I don't know how soon that happens, though.
Quick answer for you before I get to April. Essentially, this is what's going on here. Give me my wall, and I'll give you your kids back. Is that what's happening? I'll give you your kids if you give me the wall.
Yeah, I don't think that he's going to demand the wall to sign a bill that's going to address the kids at the border. Now, look, I thought
administration's policy, which is now resulting in child internment camps. That's what I said, child internment camps. We all should be able to agree that in the United States of America, we will not intentionally separate children from their parents. We will not do that. We are better than that. We are so much better. We should be able to agree that we will not keep kids in child internment camps indefinitely and hidden away from public view. What country is that? This is the United States of America.
That was ranking member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee during a hearing on the Inspector General's report on the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland joins us now. Thank you so much for being on this morning. It is great to see you.
It's good to be here.
Great to hear your voice yesterday and what you said. Tell us what's going on Capitol Hill.
I think
are you being heard?
I think we are being heard, but we certainly are being ignored. I think basically what President Trump has done is he's decided that he is going to ram this policy, and by the way, it is his policy, down the throats of the American people. And basically what he'll do is a term that I often use, he'll rope-a-dope until people get tired and they won't talk about it anymore, and then he will have his way. But this is, we're going down a slippery slope, Mika. The question is where does all of this end? When you've got toddlers sitting around in a room crying for their mother or their dad, and you've got tent cities being built, by the way, which are extremely expensive, and there are people benefiting from this, corporations, nonprofits benefiting big time, and children literally being used as hostages, really, so that President Trump can have his way. Yeah. And I would appeal to the president. Let me just say this to the president. Mr. President, when I met with you a year or so ago, I did say that you could be a great president. But I also said that you could be a great president only if you represented all the people, only if you lifted up all of their lives and made their lives better. This does not make their lives better, nor does it make our country
Administration is trying hard to deny and deflect intense criticism of its immigration policy, separating undocumented parents from their children at the southern border. They can and are trying to deny those facts. Our job on this program is to bring you those facts, and we will do that tonight. But first, you have to hear this. It's the sound of what ProPublica reports are the voices of little kids from Central America being held at a Customs and Border Protection facility last week, sobbing for their parents.
Tenemos una orquesta.
It's heartbreaking. Since we began reporting on this story, as the crisis at the border grows each day, a lot of people have said, this is not what we stand for. This is not America. This is not who we are. But is it? Because I want you to listen to some more. And you cannot deny that this is who we are right now. This is what we have become. We are now a country separating vulnerable children from their families. And in this case, as you're about to hear, a 6-year-old girl desperate for someone to phone her aunt.
Ella llama a tu tía si tú tienes número y habla con tu tía. Ah, pues ahorita ella te ayuda para que hable.
Tengo el número yo de memoria 34, 54. Hello, papá. Hello, papá. Hello, papá.
We are a nation that has always welcomed people from around the world to our shores. And let's face it, some of us, some of our ancestors have been more welcome than others. Many came here out of desperation. Many came here carrying hope. Some came here in chains and ships, but all had a hand in making America great, long before that was a corny campaign slogan, when it was a real thing, blood, sweat, and tears, when it really meant something. As these families are being ripped apart, it is important to note that 133 years ago yesterday, someone else arrived on our shores. A French ship sailed into the New York harbor carrying Lady Liberty. 200,000 people are said to have turned out to welcome her. Emma Lazarus, writing the famous poem.
Down to the border, joining us now from McAllen, Texas, MSNBC correspondent Mariana Atencio. Mariana, you've talked to mothers who've been separated from their children at the border. What have you been hearing? What have you been seeing down there?
Really, this is a completely new thing to this administration. It did not happen during the Obama administration, and it's these mothers who cross the border illegally with their children, fleeing those extremely high levels of violence in Central America that you guys were just discussing. And then they're not being prosecuted because zero tolerance isn't still operating at 100% capacity here at the border, but they're still being separated from their children, the ones older than 8, inside facilities like the one behind me. That, again, is completely new. We're trying to understand why it's happening. These mothers separated from their kids for several days. And when you begin to try to understand the psychological trauma, the impact on these kids, and you talk to them, the ones that have been separated for 4 or 5 days, they start sobbing immediately when they recount the stories of separation. So it gives you a window as to what these other thousands of kids are going through when they endure longer periods of separation. I want to play a little bit of my conversation with a mother, Christina, who was separated from her 10-year-old and her 16-year-old. Let's listen. If you would have known it was a possibility that they would have been separated from you, would you have come?
No. No hubiera venido.
I wouldn't have come.
No es. No sé cómo decirle. Es feo que lo separen a uno de los niños sin saber qué van a hacer.
It's ugly to be separated from your kids without knowing what is going to become of them. Many times what we do is for the good of our children, but you really have to think about it.
Durante el viaje se sufre mucho.
Because you suffer a lot on the journey here.
Uno piensa que ahí termina todo.
And you think that it's over when you get here.
Más a uno lo detienen, ahí comienza lo.
But once you are detained here, that's where
lo más doloroso.
The most painful part of the journey begins. It took that family 17 days to make it to the U.S. southern border. And as you guys were talking about, you know, that little boy was being recruited by gangs in El Salvador. The 16-year-old girl was kidnapped for 4 days. So that is the violence that these already traumatized children are fleeing from, only to be separated from their parents here. Guys?
Mariana, we've heard some reporting from inside these detention facilities about what it's like for the kids, and we've heard stories of the older children looking after the younger children they don't know, somebody they just met inside a detention facility, 16-year-olds changing the diapers of babies. Can you paint a picture at all, to the extent you're able to report and see and hear and get stories from the people who've been inside?
I've only been able to speak to these children who were separated from their parents for these short periods of time, so 4 or 5 days, parents who were not prosecuted. But it is through the eyes of the kids that you can start to sense or get a sense as to what these children are going through. So kids telling me really things from, I'm sleeping on the floor, I was freezing and I had to wrap myself in these tinfoil blankets. I didn't like the food. I didn't understand what these agents were telling me. Kids asking these immigration agents, when will I see my mother again? Seeing their families through these cages. So extremely traumatic experiences. And almost all of the kids, the 10-year-olds, I've spoken to 16-year-olds, they just were crying, you know, tearing up, sobbing when you ask them about this. And again, if we think about this only went on for 6 days, you can just imagine what these prolonged separations will do in the long-term trauma that will cause these kids.
Mariana Atencio in McAllen, Texas, along the border. Mariana, thanks so much.
A lot of people raising the question why, including now Hillary Clinton. She's just weighed in. I've told we have sound from her. Let's watch.
Let's be very clear. This is not happening because of the, quote, Democrats' law, as the White House has claimed. Separating families is not mandated by law at all. That is an outright lie. Those who selectively use the Bible to justify this cruelty are ignoring a central tenet of Christianity. I went to a lot of years of Sunday school. I even taught it from time to time. I've studied the Bible, both the Old and the New Testament. And what is being done using the name of religion is contrary to everything I was ever taught. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children unto me." He did not say, "Let the children suffer."
Again, you guys, this stuff deeply disturbs me. It's deeply very sad to see these children suffering like this. And I really, really hope that people see this as a show of this man's character and the things that are to come if we don't get rid of him and get him out of his seat, because he's using his seat for evil and wickedness, and crimes against children are just so disgusting. I hope you guys hear the message that I'm trying to put forth, and I hope y'all stand up and start a revolution against this type of injustice. And I hope all of you guys just pray for these children and their family, and all of you stay blessed in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ.